is they're thirsty. They've got their beverage. They're finding their seats. So I'm going to crack one open. Cheers, sir. Oh, he's pouring a glass into a Mile High Dreamin' pint glass, no less. Well, Steve, I'll let you take over. Cheers, sir.
Cheers, everybody. First of all, thank you so much to Chris and the entire Mile High Dreamin' team for helping make this happen. I was supposed to be there in person, but some things came up at the last minute, and I had to bow out. But Chris was like, "Would you be up for doing it virtually?" And I was like, anytime, anywhere, any place." So, thank you so much for the Mile High Dreamin' team for being so understanding and helpful and making this still happen by the magic of electronic zeros and ones. So I want to share my screen here, and hopefully this works. Can everybody see my screen? Can I get it? All right, we're off to a good start. I remember when COVID hit, one of the first virtual sessions Dreamin' events I did was virtual Dreamin'. I was about 30 minutes into my 45-minute presentation when somebody in the chat let me know that they were still looking at slide 1. So hopefully it goes better than that. So welcome to a session that I call Formulas and Life Hacks for the Everyday Admin. It's a collection of formulas that I've developed over the years through working as a self-taught Salesforce admin. So let me just hopefully this doesn't mess things up. Maybe it will. Yeah, I think that might mess things up. So I'm going to leave that right there. So I call the session Formulas and Life Hacks of Everyday Admin. Oh, before I go any further, a huge shout out to all of our amazing sponsors without whom Mile High Dreamin' wouldn't happen and I wouldn't be here. So tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a Salesforce MVP, finally got my 100th Trailhead badge, became a Trailhead Ranger. I'm a community college dropout. I went to Bunker Hill Community College in Charlestown, Mass, where I flunked out after 2 semesters with a 0.67 GPA. And I'm a self-taught Salesforce admin. I was working at the same company about 30 years ago as a Lotus Domino developer. And then one day in a meeting, my boss pointed at me and said, "Sales is getting this thing called Salesforce. You can take it." And I've been the admin developer, janitor, dog catcher ever since. And I'm also a world record holder. I hold the world record for the most times a speaker at Dreamforce has said the word fuck during their presentation. The previous record was 0, held by every other speaker at Dreamforce before or since. So with that in mind, Salesforce has told me whenever I do a presentation, I have to have my own safe harbor statement. So I call this session Formulas and Life Hacks for the Everyday Admin. And like I said, it's a collection of formulas that and tricks that I've learned, developed over the years as a Salesforce admin. And the first formula I want to show you is this one. This is an actual formula that I built for someone who needed to calculate the percentage of business days remaining in the current month so that they could do prorated invoicing. And hands down, the most complicated formula I've ever built. I can't believe I got it to work. Can't believe I got it under the compile size limit. And next to it is, and that's not Photoshop. That's an actual thing. That is a Victorinox Swiss Champ VATX pocket knife. It costs about $500. It got 84 blades, and it weighs almost 1 pound. And the formulas that I'm going to show you aren't like this formula, and they aren't like that Victorinox Swiss Champ. I mean, how many people can drop $500 on a pocket knife? How many people need a pocket knife that got 84 blades on it or want to lug around a 1 pound pocket knife? The formulas that I'm going to show you are like this one. This is my favorite pocket knife. It opens bottles of beer and it opens bottles of wine. And I use it every single day because I'm a Salesforce admin. So the formulas that I'm going to show you are like this one. I'm going to show you how to use some basic math to simplify an otherwise complex formula. A little custom formula field that I created on the account record that returns the name of the ultimate parent account in a multi-level account hierarchy, so you can do nice, clean reports and dashboards. The funny thing is, this formula actually came up this morning in the Trailblazer community. Another one, I'm going to show you a little trick I came up with to test your validation rule formula logic using a checkbox. And then if we have time, I'm going to show you what I consider to be the greatest formula ever written. So the first one actually came from a question that somebody posted in the Trailblazer community back in 2011. A guy named Bart Ward was trying to create a validation rule that would block a user from moving the opportunity stage backwards. So for Bart's organization, the stages were like milestones. A deal could only advance from one stage to the next stage to the next stage till its inevitable conclusion as a win or a loss. A deal couldn't be prospected, cultivated, proposal submitted, and then go back to cultivation or prospecting. A deal could only move forward. And you can see that he posted his first attempt at building this validation rule. And Bart was using a function called isPickVal. Now, if you've never used isPickVal before, it's a function whose sole purpose is to evaluate a pick list field, look for a value in that field, and then do something based on whether it found the value or didn't find the value. Now, Bart had 16 sales stages in his process, and he was using isPickVal. Now, this is the formula he posted in his initial post. Now, isPickVal, it's a time and true function. It's been around for as long as I've been a Salesforce admin, but it's not the most efficient function because you have to make a call to the pick list field every time for each value you're looking for. It's like having an Alexa, but saying, Alexa, are there zombies outside? Okay, run. Alexa, is it hot? Okay, let's go to the beach. Alexa, is it warm outside? Okay, let's go hiking. Alexa, is it raining? Okay, let's bring an umbrella. Now, I figured it out. Bart had to cover 16 different opportunity stages in every possible permutation of the previously selected value and the currently selected value. Using isPickVal, he would have needed over 150 if isPickVal statements in his formula. I guaranteed that he would have either hit the character limit, hit the compile size limit, or died of carpal tunnel syndrome before he got done writing this thing. Now, there's another function out there called case, and case is a lot like isPickVal, but it's a lot more flexible. First of all, it's not limited to just pick list fields. You can use it on date fields. You can use it on text fields. You can use it any number of places, but it's also more efficient. With the case function, you make a single call to the pick list field. You bring the list of pick list values you're looking for, the list of things to do if it finds that value, all in a single call. So here's what I did. Now, I simplified this. Bart had 16 stages, but I didn't think you guys wanted to try and read 2-point font on all my slides. So I simplified things down to just 7 stages for the purpose of this formula. So as an admin, I have access to the entire stage pick list value. So I also know what's my first stage, what's my second stage, what's my third stage, all the way to the end. So using the case function, I copied and pasted all of my stage pick list values, and I turned my first stage qualification into the number 1, my second stage into the number 2, my third stage into the number 3, my fourth stage into the number 4. Now you'll notice that I made closed won and closed lost both equal to 6. That's because they are the last stage. All I'm doing with this case function is turning pick list values into numbers. That's all I'm doing. Then when I wrote my case statement, I copied and pasted what I had written back into the same formula, but in my second case statement, I wrapped a prior value function around the stage name. All I'm doing here is I'm going out and getting whatever value was in the opportunity stage field when the user clicked that edit button. What was the previous value to occupy this field before this user edited this record? And again, I just turned them into the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And then in between my first case statement and my second case statement, I added a less than mathematic operator. So this is my complete formula. I'm just using a case statement to evaluate the current values of the opportunity stage field, turn them into numbers, and the previous values of the opportunity stage field, turn those into numbers, and compare them to each other. Now, I may have flunked out of community college, but even I know that the number 3 is less than the number 4. So if a user tries to move an opportunity backwards from proposal price quote, which is equal to the number 4, to value proposition, which is equal to number 3, the user is blocked from the saving this record. I'm just using a case function and some basic math to cover every possible combination of stage and previous stage. This is the complete formula. I don't have 150 is-pick vals. And the cool thing is, like this formula, I posted it back in 2011, but people still comment on it, but with slightly different requirements. Some people are like, well, I do need to allow people to move a deal back 1 stage or 2 stage because my stages are like tiers or plateaus. Like we might have, somebody might submit a quote, but they reject it. So we've got to redo the proposal. Fine. You make your first tier of stages equal to the number 1. You make your second tier of stages all equal to the number 2. You make your next tier of stages equal to the number 3. And you make your last tier of stages equal to number 4. And the deal can slide back between price quote and proposal and process proposal and submitted, but they can't move it all the way back to needs analysis or qualification. Again, using a case statement to turn pick list values into numbers and doing some basic math. Another thing that comes up a lot in the Trailblazer community is people will post a formula like this. And what they're trying to do is block a deal worth more than $50,000 from being moved to the proposal stage if it hasn't been approved. Well, this is great if the only stage is proposal, but what if there are other stages after proposal? Unless you've got a rule in place that blocks people from advancing over the proposal stage, they could skip proposal and move it to price quote without approval, contract review without approval, or they could move it all the way to closed won without approval. So taking the lesson I learned solving Bart's problem back in 2011, I write those kinds of validations like this. A user can't move the deal to proposal, price quote, contract review, or closed won because those are all greater than or equal to the number 4 unless they get the deal approved. Now, you don't always have to write it like this with all of the stages, all of the, assigning a numeric value to all of them. You can simplify it. If you only want to invoke this rule on 4 stages, you just put them in the formula and turn them into a 1. And basically, if it's proposal, price quote, contract review, those stages are equal to 1. You can't move the deal if it's worth $50,000 or more until it's been approved. Or another one that just came up about a month or so ago. This one comes up actually quite often. Some people not only want to block people from moving the opportunity stage backwards, they actually want to prevent people from skipping over stages. For them, they want to make sure that the deal goes through every single stage in the life cycle. But they also need to allow the user to move a deal from any stage to closed loss. Because let's face it, you can lose a deal in proposal. You can lose a deal in qualification. And you don't want to force users to shove a deal through every single stage just so they can get it to closed loss, because that'll mess up all your historical data. It will look like every single deal was lost in the negotiation stage. It'll make your opportunity history reports basically worthless, and those are great reports to have. So I took the formula I wrote for Bart and made 3 changes. I added an exemption if they're moving the deal to closed loss. I added a +1 to the prior value case statement. And then I changed my less than mathematic operator to a not equals operator. If they are changing the opportunity stage and they are not moving this deal to closed loss, and the stage they're selecting is not 1 higher than the previous stage, they're blocked from saving the record. They can't move it backwards 1. They can't move it forwards 2, 3, 4. They can only move it to the next stage. And again, I took a formula that I wrote for Bot back in 2011 with a couple of tweaks and some basic math. I solved this problem. So this next one is a formula that I came up with in my own org. If you use parent accounts and account hierarchies in your Salesforce org, they're great because it organizes your account records, organizes your data, and I'm a big data hygiene geek. But the problem is when you try to run a sales pipeline report and you try grouping it by that parent account field instead of the account field, you get something that looks like this. Like Octan is the parent of Lego and United Oil and Gas. And United Oil and Gas is the parent of United Oil and Gas, Singapore, UK, and US. But the revenue for the Octan Corporation hierarchy is scattered in all these different report groupings. And so, all right, that's a mess, but maybe I could add a nice chart to make sense of it. Great. Now the Octan revenue is scattered across 3 different stacks. So hopefully your boss has a calculator that's got red, orange, green, yellow, blue, and pink keys on it. Now, I have a saying. If you build a report or a dashboard and the person who's looking at that report or dashboard needs a piece of paper and a pencil or a calculator to figure out what that report is telling them, you built a shitty report. And I don't want to be known as the guy that builds the shitty reports. So here's what I did. I knew I had to somehow create a new field that would return the name of the top account in the account hierarchy. But the problem is our account hierarchies ran 4 levels deep. And some accounts have no parent account because they're the top parent. And sometimes there is no account hierarchy at all. It's just one flat account. And I've got tens of thousands of accounts. I don't know where in the hierarchy every account is. I don't know if there is no account hierarchy at all. And I was wondering how I was going to solve this. And I got to give a shout out to a guy named Deepak Anand, who, in my opinion, is the trailblazer community GOAT. If you've ever seen his answers, I mean, his stuff is just legendary. And it's not just the solutions he came up with. It was the way he would explain what his solution did, how it functioned. And it was in one of his answers where he used a function called blank value. And he explained how blank value was working and how he was using it, that I had that light bulb moment. If you've never used the blank value function, and for years I didn't really know how I could use it or what it even did. But the blank value function basically evaluates a field. And if that field is blank, it allows you to provide a substitute to use instead of that field. So here's what I did. I created a custom formula field on the account object. I selected text as my result type, and then I inserted the blank value function into my formula. And then I used the insert field button to go into the account and find the parent account lookup field on the account. And then I scrolled through the list of fields on that parent account, and I found the parent account lookup field on that parent account. And I clicked through that, and I found the parent account lookup field on that account. And I clicked through that, and I kept on clicking and clicking and clicking. Now, like I said, I did some research, and I found that our highest account hierarchy was 4 levels. But I wanted to build a bit of a buffer so I wouldn't have to rebuild this formula. So I went up 6 levels. So I kept on clicking up and up and up until I got to the parent account, and I returned the account name. But I don't know if this account or any other account actually has a parent account. Again, it might be the top account in the hierarchy, it might be the middle account in the hierarchy, or there could be no hierarchy at all. So what I did is I created another blank value statement and I nested it inside of my first blank value. And then I went up 5 levels and returned that parent account name. But if I go up 5 levels and that's also blank, then I open up another blank value statement and I go up 4 tiers and I get that account name. And if that's blank, I go up 3 tiers and grab that account name. And I go up 2 tiers and get that account name. And I go up 1 tier and I get that account name. And if I've gone up 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 levels, and every single one of those is blank, then that means that I must be on the top account in the hierarchy, or there is no hierarchy at all. And then I just close the whole thing out with 5 right brackets. Now, the cool thing about custom formula fields is the second you create them, they're available on nearly every single report type of that object and every single existing report that references that object. So I take my existing opportunity pipeline report and I just swap out the standard parent account field on the account object with my ultimate parent account field and use that as my report grouping. This is the same report we started with, but now all of the Octane Corporation revenue for Octane, Pyramid, Lego, United Oil and Gas, Singapore, UK, US, and the parent United Oil and Gas, all 7 accounts, all 145 opportunities, all $6.9 million in one nice, neat bucket. And Warnham Hogg has the revenue for Dunder Mifflin and Warnham Hogg in one nice, neat bucket. And now my report charts look like this with all the Octane revenue in one nice, neat bar and all the Warnham Hogg revenue in one nice, neat bar. And those 3 standalone accounts, Three Stooges, Initech, Midstate Office Supply, their revenue is not in this empty blank report grouping like the Island of Misfit Toys. Those accounts also have their account name displayed on the ultimate parent account because they are the ultimate parent account and all their revenue is in a nice, neat bucket. Oh, there we go. And again, it's a simple formula text field with a nested blank value statement. And again, I couldn't have done it without Deepak Anand. So wherever you are, Deepak, cheers. So this next one is a little trick that I came up with in my own Salesforce org. So I was making a change to a validation rule in my org, and the validation rule involved the opportunity object. Now, in my opinion, the opportunity object is like the golden child of Salesforce objects. I mean, let's face it, like you could do something that royally screws up activities and people might not notice for a day, a week, a month, maybe ever. You do something that screws up opportunities and your phone will be ringing off the hook and your inbox will be filling up before you can even take your finger off the mouse when you clicked save on whatever it is you did. So I was making this change to an existing validation rule, and it was on opportunities. And the change that I had to make had a lot of or clauses on it. And ors are always tricky because if you're not careful, you can create a loop from which users can't escape, even though they've filled out all the required information, or you can create a loophole that actually lets in the bad data that you're trying to block. So I'm making this change to this already complicated validation rule, and the change is kind of tricky. And I just wasn't really convinced whether I had it or not. And now, like, if you're building a formula, pretty much any formula, whether it's a validation rule, a formula field, a report summary formula, flow builder, lead assignment rule, case assignment rule, approval process, nearly every formula editor has some version of the check syntax button. So, you're building your formula, you close your eyes, you make a wish, and you click that check syntax button. You open your eyes. Hopefully you see green, not red. You're under the compile size limit. You're not using any invalid functions or, missing API field names, whatever. The problem is that the check syntax button just checks the syntax. It doesn't check the logic. And even though I flunked out of community college, I remember from basic algebra that A plus B divided by C and A plus B divided by C, while they're both syntactically correct, they're going to give you completely different and potentially bad results. But there's no check logic button in the formula editor. So how do I make sure that my formula logic is sound? And so in thinking about it, I remember that validation rules are Boolean. Either a record passes the validation rule or it flunks the validation rule. And when you're writing a validation rule, you're really writing the criteria for what defines a bad record. It's like a medical test. If the test comes back positive, the record is bad. If the test comes back negative, the record is good. And thinking about it, it's like, well, checkboxes are like that. Checkbox is a Boolean. So here's what I did. On my opportunity object, I created a custom field. I called it validation rule test. I selected formula as my data type and checkbox as my result. And so if my formula returns a true or checkbox, that means that the record would fail my validation rule. If it returns a false or unchecked checkbox, that means the record would pass my validation rule. So suppose I had a pick list field on my org called, do you owe SteveMo a beer? It's a pick list field. So here's my validation rule. Is blank text, do you owe me a beer? Great. Nobody can save a record and leave that blank. But I certainly don't owe myself a beer. Chris don't owe me a beer. And I got some other buddies, the Three Stooges, the Big Lebowski. So what if I want to exempt them? So I can amend this rule and I can use a thing called global variable. We have access to the person's user profile, user role, user ID. But please, whatever you do, don't use hard-coded IDs and formulas. Every time you do that, God kills a baby seal. Use the username, the profile name, the user role name, the record type name, or the record type developer name whenever you're writing a formula. Okay, so here's my amended validation rule, exempting myself from owing me a beer. But like I said, I've got some buddies, and I also don't want them to owe me a beer. So I might write it like this and amend them. Mo, Larry, Curly, don't forget Shemp, and my buddy the Dude from the Big Lebowski. So here's my validation rule. So instead of putting this in a validation rule, hoping it's logically correct and activating it and seeing what happens, instead of that, I put my formula inside my validation rule check test formula checkbox field. So I put the formula in, I click the check syntax button. I've got no syntax errors. So if I look at a record and it's got a checkbox, that means that the record will fail my validation rule. If it's got an unchecked checkbox, it means it will pass my validation rule. Now I create a report or a list view that has the fields my formula is evaluating and my validation rule test checkbox side by side. And I've got a problem. According to this validation rule, I owe myself a beer. Shemp owes me a beer. Larry owes me a beer. Curly, Shemp owes me a beer. Mo owes me a beer. The Dude owes me a beer. Does anybody know what is wrong with my formula? Does anybody want to take a guess what my fatal flaw is? There are no fabulous prizes, by the way, so there's no wrong answers. Nobody? Or is everybody on mute? All right, so, well, in the interest of time, somebody taking a guess? Okay, so the problem in my formula is my or clause. See, a user only has one username, only has one user role, only has one user profile. And when I put all of my exempt users in an or clause, I trap them from a loop which no user could ever be exempted from. Because my user record only has my name on it. Mo's user record only has Mo's name on it. The dude's user record only has the dude's name on it. A user can only have one username unless that user is Schrodinger's cat, in which case all bets are off. So I go back and I edit my formula. I get rid of that or clause and I wrap everything in an and. If they leave the required field blank, and they're not me, and they're not Mo, and they're not Larry, and they're not Curly, and they're not Shemp, and they're not the dude, they're blocked from saving this record and leaving that field blank. So I put my updated formula back into my validation rule test checkbox field, check syntax, make sure I don't have any missing commas or anything like that. And then I go back to my report or list view, and I can see that it's working exactly as it should. The only records that have a checkbox are the ones that should. Non-exempt users who have left the field blank. Now, little caveat, because this is a formula field and not an actual validation rule, there are some functions that are available in a validation rule formula that aren't available in a formula field. You can't use is new, is change, prior value, regex, or lookup in a formula field. So if your validation rule needed any of them, you'd have to comment them out of the formula checkbox field and then uncomment them if after you do your logic check. But other than that, you can test your actual formula in a safe environment, validate your results before you activate your actual validation rule. And the cool thing is, like, I built this thing for that, wonky validation rule, which by the way worked. But the cool thing is you can now run a report to see how many non-compliant records you have. So you can give people a heads up. It's like, okay, just so you know, this rule that we're rolling out on Friday, come Monday morning, about 25% of your team's deals are going to be non-compliant. So expect to get some phone calls and emails from your team on how to fix stuff. You can give you a heads up before you roll out a validation rule on how much bad data you really have, and prepare accordingly. Identify gaps in training, stuff like that. Again, just a simple formula checkbox field, and you don't need one of these for every validation rule. I just have one of these on every object. I just use it and reuse it every time I'm creating a brand new validation rule or making a change to an existing validation rule. I just use it for that one-time final logic check before I activate. And then next time I got to make another change, I just repurpose that same checkbox formula field. So the last one I got, we still got time, is, in my opinion, the greatest formula of all time, and I didn't write it. It's called the power of one. I learned it at my very first Dreamforce back in 2009 at an analytics workshop that was led by a guy named Tom Tobin. He was one of the analytics product managers at Salesforce, and he showed this formula in his presentation, and my jaw hit the floor. And so a lot of people attribute it to me. I mean, Tom no longer works for Salesforce, but I spread the gospel of the power of one wherever I can go. So that's what I tell people is, like, Tom passed it on to me. I'm just his humble apostle, spreading the gospel of the power of one. So without further ado, it's a formula field that you create on whatever object you want to count. So you select data type equals formula, result equals number, 0 decimals. You don't need any decimals. I see people create power one fields and they put decimals in there for some reason. You just need the whole number. And then most important part of all, here's the formula. It's the number one. Nope, that's it. It's just the number one. So why is this the greatest formula of all time? Why is this thing so awesome? I mean, you create a power of one field on the opportunity object, and then you hit save and you look at an opportunity record and it's got this one on it. Like, what's so great about it? Well, what's so great about it is this. The second you hit save, every single existing opportunity record, no matter how old your Salesforce org is, no matter how many hundreds, thousands, millions, bazillions, gazillions of opportunity records you have, every single one of them is going to have a one on it. And every single opportunity that is created after you hit save is also going to have a one on it. So how does it work? Well, here is a plain vanilla off the shelf opportunities with products report. And I'm using the plain vanilla slider at the bottom of the report, show record count. And this report is telling me I've got 1,251 records in this report. But it's not telling me 1,251 of what? 1,251 opportunity owners? Okay, I flunked out of community college, but I think I can count to 6. 1,251 accounts that have an opportunity, 1,251 opportunities, 1,251 opportunity products, 1,251 widgets that are being sold. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. The only way to know for sure is to click show details, because we just happen to magically be under the 2,000 row limit. Take our phone off the hook, cancel our meetings for the next couple of hours, and count the number of rows in this report one by one. Hope we don't lose track, miss, or die of carpal tunnel syndrome doing all that clicking. So just like our Ultimate Parent account, the second we hit save, not only is this field populated on every single opportunity record, it is also available in nearly every single opportunity object report, including the report that we started with. So we just open our report, our existing report. We grab our account power one. We drag it into the report, select sum, summarize sum. We grab our opportunity owner user power one field, drag it into the report, select summarize sum. We grab our opportunity power one field, select summarize sum. We grab our opportunity product power one field, select summarize sum. Oh yeah, another word of advice. Don't name your fields all power one. I've seen people add the power one to all the objects in their org, and then they email me and say, hey, I saw your presentation on the power one, but I don't know what these results mean. And I look at their report, and every single one of their power one fields is literally called power one. Look, it's your org. You can be like George Foreman and name all your kids George if you want. I like knowing what I'm looking at, so I name each of my power one fields after the object that I created on. My user power one field is called user. My account power one field is called account. My opportunity power one field is called opportunity. So I add all my power one fields to this report, select summarize sum. This is the exact same report we started with. Now I can see that, yes, I can in fact count to 6. Thank you very much, Malden Public School System. I can also see that there are 41 unique accounts that have an opportunity in this report. There are 1,067 opportunity records. There are also 315 opportunity product line item records in this report. And I was able to do all that, no report summary formulas, all using that little number one on the opportunity object, the user object, the account object, and the opportunity product object. That is why it's the greatest formula ever written. And that's all I got. And you owe me a beer. Sláinte. Wow, I think I came in on the time, so we've got some time for some Q&A if anybody wants to.
Anybody got questions for SteveMo? Other than what his favorite beer is. It's IPA, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the hazy, juicy New England style IPA. The Cloud Candy being one of them.
Any questions? I think
Yeah.
we're.
A question about any of the formulas that I showed you. I'll get my deck to Chris after the session wraps up. One word of advice. This has come up before. When you're building a formula, the quotes have to be what's called straight quotes or dumb quotes. They got to be straight. They can't have a serif or be curly or twisty. I've seen people post syntactically correct formulas in the Trailblazer community, and they're like, this formula is not working, and I'm getting a syntax error, but it won't tell me what the actual error is. When you copy and paste a formula from Microsoft Word or Outlook or any word editor or anything like that, Microsoft likes to be helpful and it likes to do the curly quotes, whatever. And it's like, yeah, thanks for nothing, Clippy McPaperclip. Your formula got to have straight quotes. So if you do use the formulas from my slides, be mindful of that. I tried to clean them up, but PowerPoint being PowerPoint sometimes is like, oh, I see you've got some words here. Let me help you out. So you might just be mindful of that if you do copy and paste any of the formulas from my slides into your org to clean them up. There's a really cool formula editor called Notepad++. It's free. I use that to write a lot of my formulas, and it allows you to do those mass cleanups of curly quotes to straight quotes, stuff like that. Also, nice little thing. It's basically like somebody took Windows Notepad, put it on steroids, and turned it into a code editor. Little cool thing you can do with Notepad++. If you've got ands and ors and a lot of parens and stuff like that, if you click on a left paren, it highlights it in red, and it also highlights whatever right paren closes that one out. So you can see where this or begins and ends, where an and begins and ends. Or click on a left paren, and you see black, and that means you're missing that right paren. So you got some cleaning up to do. Great little app, Notepad++.
We got one question here.
I lied.
Shoot.
It's not a question. Just at the last session with Peter Coffey, I think the entire audience was stunned and just trying to digest what he'd said. And I've seen your presentation 3 times, Steve, and I just want to let you know that it never disappoints. And I hyped you up to some people here. So I don't want you to interpret no questions as we weren't paying attention or not enjoying. I want you to interpret it as this group has now got the gerbil running through their head saying, where am I going to use this? And I've been using the power of one ever since I heard you speak about it about 4 years ago. So thank you very much.
Again, not me, Tom Tobin. And like, yeah, I mean, like, I'm not
spread the gospel.
I'm not joking. I'm not joking. When he showed that thing, I was just like, it was my first Dreamforce, and that was my Dreamforce moment where it was just like, holy crap, that's incredible. And I went home from that Dreamforce, and I added it to every single object, even objects that my company wasn't even using at the time, like cases. I mean, when I create a custom object, it is the first custom field I add to that object is a Power of One field. And don't get me wrong, I love count unique. The relative, it's been around for a few releases now. Report function, it's great for users if your admin has not created a Power of One field. You as a user can use a function called count unique. All you got to do is grab a field like record ID in the report and count the unique, and that will basically do what the Power of One is doing. And I remember when count unique first came out, a lot of people emailed me and tweeted to me like, "Oh, is this the end of the Power of One?" No, don't get Power of One ready for the dirt nap just yet. They do a lot of the same thing, but there's also some gaps, and they play nicely together. They augment each other. Like I mean, I see in the community over the years, excuse me, somebody will see one of my Power of One solutions, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm trying to get the count of times that this pick list value occurs in this report," or something like that. It's like, oh, Power One can't do that, and at the time, nothing could. Count Unique can do that. But there's still like a limit on the number of count uniques you can do. I know when it first came out, I think you could only do one. I think they bumped it to 3. I don't know if it's infinite like Power of One. And you create a Power of One field on an object, any record type that has that object will have the Power of One in it. So they both have their advantages. Also, Power of One, the second you as an admin create it, you're giving it to all your users. They don't have to do count unique on their own. You're giving them that unique, right there in every existing report. All they got to do is just grab it like any other field. So they both have their pluses, minuses, and they play well together. They complement each other. Both great functions. I don't know if there's a comment in the chat or. Oh, anybody have any other questions?
I'll just add one thing. You mentioned it, but people don't appreciate the fact that it's retroactive in a sense. You mentioned some people say, "Oh, well, I don't need a formula. I'll add a field and just update it." Well, now you've touched all those records if you're going to add that Power of One. So not only just for the Power of One formula, but really, do I want something done to all my records where I'm not actually updating the last edited date or last modified date?
Great comment, because here is an admin got you if you've never run into this. Somebody posted a question a while back in the Answers community. They were trying to do a validation rule on the opportunity record, but only opportunities that were, but they needed to exempt opportunities that were created via lead convert because they didn't have a field on the lead that they could actually pass into this required field on the opportunities. They needed to create a one-time on create exemption from this validation rule. And so there's a number of different ways you can do it. You can create like a custom flow that you use via lead convert, stuff like that. But this old school hackish way to do it, and I'm an old school hack, is you create a custom checkbox field on the lead. You set the default value to true. You create a custom field on the opportunity. Set the default value to false, unchecked. You map your lead checkbox field to your opportunity checkbox field so that when the lead's converted, it sets that checkbox to checked. And then in your validation rule, you basically write an exemption, one-time exemption for leads created via lead convert by checking to see if this checkbox field is checked. If the checkbox is checked, it means the opportunity was created via lead convert. If the checkbox is unchecked, the opportunity was created organically and the user needs to fill out the field. Here's the rub. If you have any pre-existing lead records, when you create that checkbox field on the lead object and you select default value equals checked, Salesforce does not retroactively go back and update that checkbox field on every existing lead record. Existing records do not inherit default values. You need to run a mass update of all your existing leads to manually set your checkbox field to true on your existing lead records. Little gotcha about like retroactive field updates. Formula fields, like the Power One, one of the beauties of formula fields is you don't have to worry about that. They're dynamic. They're alive. The second you hit save, they just go off into every single record and do their stuff. All they're waiting for is a user to call that record to the screen in one form or another, either in a list view or clicking the edit button or the view button or running a report. Every single formula field like wakes up, does its math, and throws it on the screen to the user in whatever method that user is using to call that record up. But default value, I kind of wish that, I remember, some people know how much, I love animals, but I hate multi-pickless fields with as much passion as I love animals. And Salesforce, a couple of releases ago, actually, they added, I think it's like when you create a multi-pickless field, they actually have like a warning message now that lets you know how much they suck. It'd be nice if Salesforce, when you set the default value field, that default value on a field, if Salesforce had a little gotcha pop-up that lets you know, hey, just so you know, every record you've already got, they're going to be empty. You got to do this, that, or the other thing. Fire up data loader, fire up the data import wizard. You've got to some way, somehow get that default value in all your existing records. Because some people, there's nothing that like, hey, ta-da, like, just so you know, there's nothing like that. You're kind of like, that's one of those hard lessons I learned.
I love it. Any other questions? Nothing? Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Any other, like, round of applause? Yeah. This man. Raise of hands. How many of you have been saved hours of your life from what you learned today? Thank goodness. That's what we want to see. We're here to learn and have beer. So thank you again so much.
Yeah. Here you go, Steve.
And again, thank you guys so much. I mean, like Chris, when I had to write the email to Chris saying like, I gotta tap out. I'm so sorry. And Chris is Chris. His first email back to me wasn't like, you're shitting me. Really? Like 3 weeks out? Come on. Like his first email to me was like, okay, it happens. By the way, would virtual be an option? Thank you so much. The times that I have been out there, I've loved it. You guys are all amazing. Love Denver. Hope to make it out there next year. Thank you so much. And if anybody in looking through my slides or whatever, just has like an aha moment or like what the hell was he talking about moment, just hit me up in the Answers community, in the Trailblazer community, with any questions you got about this stuff or just I love to geek out on formulas. I love to geek out on how do you solve something that's not in the owner's manual. I love that. And it's not just me. I think of I remember when I did the keynote for Chris a couple of years ago, I talked about like my neighborhood where, on this little tiny street that I live on, we got a doctor, an EMT nurse, a med flight EMT, a retired auto mechanic, 2 electricians, and a guy with a smoker who makes his own bacon. Like, if a media hit, we'd be like the second biggest economy in the post-apocalyptic world. And we all just like help each other out. That's what the Trailblazer community is like. I know a little bit about flow. I know enough to get myself into trouble, but there's people who just live and breathe flow, and they are the best. It's a community of people who are the best in the world at what they do, and what they do is Salesforce. There's people who do Lightning Web components, Apex code, Tableau, Pardot, all these little like niche things that I don't know. I'm like a formula guy. And we all just like geek out on solving these problems, like popping the hood and just like MacGyvering stuff. Because that's the cool thing is like the thing like the default value or like that ain't in the owner's manual, or if it is, it's buried on page 950 of the Salesforce owner's manual. And there's those little gotchas that are out there, and you got this incredible community of other admins and devs and users who they're in your shoes and they're in the same journey, and some of them have been there before you. They know what to look out for, how to get around it. So if you're not active in the Trailblazer community, get out there. It's like the one remaining corner of the internet that's still nice. Everybody,
Agreed.
It is.
Yeah. Well, SteveMo, we know formulas go well with beer. So cheers one more time. Next year in person. Thank you so much.
Round of applause for SteveMo, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.